Hello everybody, and welcome to the second in our series of flies for the Bronze Award, Fly Dressers Guild Bronze Award. We're going to be covering the black Pennel today, quite a useful wet fly, certainly years ago, very traditional pattern to fish at buzzer time, very simple, and we're going to be tying it on a size anything between a 10 and a 14. If you follow the Bronze Award booklet, for this particular pattern I'm going to be tying on a size 12, which is the a fly box competition wet. I think it's slightly bigger, slightly heavier than the hook we used for the Soldier Palmer. This will usually be tied on as a point fly, so just a little bit heavier to get down, a little bit deeper. Thread is black, and I'm going to be using UTC Ultra 70 denier, and foundation thread, tying it in just to the tip of the hook. Remove the waist and then wind down to the start of the bend. The tail for this fly is golden tippet, and what you want to do is to check a size which gives you a barring about the length of the hook shank. So if we pull it off the stem, and then we'll just remove all of the straggly bits either side of the feather, you should be able to get 2 or 3 attempts of tails out of one of these feathers. And we're going to set out about 7-8 fibers, and what I'm going to do is to pull a small bunch slightly to one side, and then holding the tip of the feather tightly, pull it away from the stem so that it gives you that little quick of the stem of the fibre of the tippet feather, but it'll keep everything together. So when we offer that up, we put it in position so that the barring is just about where the tying thread is. Pinch and loop, a couple of those just to check everything's okay. Now I'm going to bind that down to the, it's just a little bit too long, so I'm just going to ease it a little bit so that when I get to the start of the bend, I've just got the black barring on the tippet feather showing. So I'm going to remove the tips, the stray bits, and then I'm going to take the thread through in open turns just to trap those tail fibers out of the way. And then I'm going to be tying in a tinsel ribbing. This is Uni French tinsel small, extra small if you're tying it on a 14, but for the 10s and 12s this material should be fine. I'm just going to offer it underneath the shank and tie it off and pull it through, and then I think that's lost a bit of its cover. Put it underneath, pull it through, and then bind everything down, keeping that nice and slim, and then taking it taking the thread through to where you tied everything in, tail in rather, and then come back in open turns. We're going to be tying in the body material, which is, in this case, it's a black floss. This is Unifloss, single strand. It's multi-filament, so it's a bit, can be a bit straggly when you catch your fingers on these fibres. So I'm just giving it a little bit of moisture to keep them all together, and then just going to tie pull that forward so it's binding that down, and then leave the thread where it is, and then we're going to be binding in touching turns down the body, and then finishing where we've tied in the tail feather and the ribbing, and then come back again in touching turns, trying to keep it all fairly neat, and then bring it back to the start of, sorry, the about 3 millimeters back from the eye, and then come back again, but only about 2/3 of the way down the shank, and then come back over it. So what we're looking for is a cigar shape. But just remember that whatever you do for one, you do for all of your flies to get that consistent shape. So tying that off and remove the rubbish, and then just bring the thread back to the end of the body so that we can tie off the ribbing when we go through. So we're looking for about 4 to 5 turns on this pattern, depending on what hook size you are. But bear in mind when you're doing it that you're tying a spiral of thread, of silk. So if you get it even on your side, then it's got to be even on this side as well. So we've got 4 turns there, and then tying it off, and then snip away the waste. So just check that your ribbing is reasonably even, and then just bind down any remnants that you've got and make a foundation for the hackle, which in this case is a black hen cape. This is an Indian cape, so they tend to be a bit short in the length of the hackle fibres, because we're looking for about 1.5 times the hook gape. So just stroking those out, and that's just a bit too long. So I'll go back to the cape, and it does pay you to prepare all of your materials before you tie in. So in other words, if you're going to be tying a wet fly hackle size 12, then you've got to get that gape size right, about 1.5 times, and then select half a dozen or more so that you haven't got, and check them out for size before you even attempt to do any tying. So you've got the materials there. Right, I'm going to tie this in, not by the stall because it says in the handbook, but by the tip. I just think it's a nicer way of doing it, and I don't think it's particularly difficult to do it. If you're starting out, possibly, but it's just a question of preparing the hackle. And what I'm doing is stroking back the fibres as we did with the soldier palmer, stroking back all but a few of the tip feathers, and then creating a little bit of a burr for you to tie in, and you can then tie that in without trapping too much rubbish. You don't have to trim it off. Now if you wanted to add a little bit of beeswax at this stage, I haven't got mine here, but it just helps to give it a little bit of security, to save the hackle tip tying out. But just by giving it a little bit of tension, which you can do with this UTC, it holds it in nice and firmly. So just holding the stalk with the hackle pliers, a little bit of saliva to double the hackle back, and we'll take one turn forward, just stroking the fibres back, another turn forward, start again, one turn forward, stroke it back, second stroke forward, encourage those fibres that have gone forward to come back. And if you want to put third turn, if your hackle allows you, third turn, and then take 2 or 3 turns to trap everything in, and then just trim off the hackle stalk, not by cutting it, but just pull it over a pair of scissors or a craft knife. And then if you've got any odd fibres, pull them all back and then bind them in, but don't go over the hackle base. You know, the idea of that is just to keep the angle of the feathers, of the fibres rather, back at about 45 degrees. Just making sure everything's okay. 3 or 4 turns to create a tiny head, and then the whip finish. Everything tight. Trim off, and then a little bit of varnish, or in my case I'm using UV. Got a little bit of a tag there, but the beauty of the UV is that that tag will then become solid, and then I can just trim it off. So the blob there, it's soaking in, and then with an old or disused hackle, I use the hackle stalk, put it through the eye of the hook, pull everything through, and then give it a zap with the UV. And then with that little tag, there we go, making sure everything looks all right. And as I say, consistency does require a lot of practice. But if you prepare all your materials first, your tail feathers, your hackle feathers, have all the materials to hand, then you can practice and try and do it all in one session rather than go away and then think you can get to it again by coming back and starting to tie straight away. It takes 2 or 3 attempts to know where you're going, and then you can then tie, hopefully tie about 6, where you can then choose 3 from those 6 to the ones that you're going to submit. Hope you enjoyed this one. See you next time.